Always good to have a little bit of. There we go. So let me just give you a little bit of background. As was mentioned, we were started at a startup weekend. Let me tell you a little bit about myself personally. So I'm from Seattle originally. Grew up here, went to high school here, spent about a year in Beijing. Went to school at Washington University in St. Louis. While I was in St. Louis, I spent pretty much all the time I could pursuing entrepreneurial ventures. So on campus stuff, took a class on entrepreneurship. To the best degree possible, I participated in the very small but growing startup community in St. Louis. Then after my junior year of college, I came back to Seattle, just kind of looking for something cool to work on. So I had all these half-baked business ideas and projects that I was working on, Git repos on my computer, just in really poor states. But I just wanted to spend the summer doing something like that. So in June, I heard about Startup Weekend and attended one actually just down the street at Amazon's new headquarters. So Startup Weekend showed up there Friday. As you guys experienced yesterday, people go up front, start pitching an idea. One of the ideas that was pitched at the one I was at was Airbnb for dogs. So somebody stood up there and said, I have a dog, or I had a dog actually. I took her to a kennel, and when I got home, when I picked my dog up, she had kennel cough, she was miserable, and ever since he's been taking his dog to his neighbors' houses. So instead of actually taking it to a commercial solution, he wished there was something he could pay for, not impose on his friends, and take it to a house instead, just like he did now. So initially I was actually pitching, I think it was a beer heat map, so where you can find the cheapest beer in your neighborhood was my original Startup Weekend pitch, but fortunately for me, didn't get any traction. Nobody was interested in participating on that project. So I went up to the guy who pitched this, and a little backstory about myself. I've always wanted a dog, and whenever I go to parks, like dog parks, public parks, just people walking their dogs, and I get an opportunity to pet their dog, I get really uncomfortably excited. So it's really embarrassing for my girlfriend. I'll just get really into petting a dog. So this to me sounded like the perfect opportunity. So as you experienced yesterday, you get in these teams, you kind of have a group of people with you, and you kind of probably started writing code. So that was our day one. We just wrote the very beginnings of the code, we sat around, talked about what we would actually be building. These are actually, I just went in our Git repo, and still the same repo that we worked on Friday night. Day two comes around, and this is the piece where I think this is really the key piece. You have all day today. This is really your only full, complete day. You're about halfway through it. The Underpants Gnomes in South Park have this grand business plan. They're going to collect underpants. That's phase one. Phase two. Then phase three is profit. So this is kind of a common problem. This actually really came up when I was talking with Scott about, we were talking about what are really the primary problems that Startup Weekend projects tend to run into. And the reality is, of course, building your product, not knowing what the second step is, and then profiting is a very common mistake. So in my opinion at least, at Startup Weekend, what you really want to demonstrate, what you want to walk away with, what you want to show the judges on Sunday, is you have found somebody who's willing to pay for your product, charge them money, and you can show like a $10 bill that literally somebody gave you for your product. If you can't make that happen, so that's a pretty high bar, right? Like honestly, you have to actually legitimately find somebody. Hopefully, somebody in this room could count, but going out and actually finding a customer is a hard task. If you can't do that, get survey data. So survey data can be really compelling. If you have 60 or 70 people giving you some kind of information that indicates that your product is actually viable, that's extremely powerful. And then not quite as powerful as that, but still very useful, is if you get anecdotal evidence. So if you talk to 5 or 10 customers, and each of them say, I would pay for this because this is a real problem I have, and so on. So that's kind of your, not quite as good as any of the others, but it's still a better thing to have than nothing come tomorrow. So let me give you a 30-second example of exactly this problem. So my third year of college, I spent hundreds of hours. This was a project I had been working on for months, and took this entrepreneurship class and spent the whole class semester working on it, and over the summer I was working on it. And this is actually pretty similar to one of the projects I heard here, or actually 2 of the projects, I think.
Don't deflate their hopes.
So the idea was, you have these really powerful computers in your pocket, your smartphones, and currently when you go to a museum, they give you this like bulky thing about this big that you plug really awful headphones into, and you walk around looking like a geek, and you walk up and you type in the number of the exhibit, and then you listen to the audio, and you keep moving, right? It feels like it's something out of the 1980s. So I wanted to fix that. So I spent months building a mobile website. It was phone gap integrated, so you could scan QR codes, and like the intent would be if you in the future, once phones actually support it, you could do near-field communication and just walk up and scan your phone, right? Just product-wise, a million times better than what was currently existing for audio tour guides. But there's no customer. So as soon as I had this awesome thing I was really excited about from an engineering perspective, I went out and tried to sell it, and just no traction. You know, I was calling museums, going in and talking to them, just couldn't even get them to actually use it, even if I gave it away, literally. So it was just the exact case of product before customer fit. Scott, I think, actually was what brought this up, and he had a very similar project too.
Well, before I joined the team at Cheeseburger about 6 years ago, I spent about 6 months working on a project. I called it a startup, but it never really started or up. Because what happened is we spent a lot, like Phil, we spent a lot of time working on it, and we had some customer validation, but I learned something then, which is, if you're going to start a business, there's two things you have to have. You have to have a good business idea, and you have to have an idea that you care about. And we had an idea that we thought was pretty good, but we didn't really care about it. Because eventually it gets hard, and when you don't care, you just kind of quit. And we didn't quit like we didn't have a big meeting where we said, hey, we're quitting today. It was just like one person came, said, hey, I got a job. Right? And that was sort of like the first crack in the dam, and then all of a sudden it just melted away. And so it's a lesson that goes along with a third thing to think about, I suppose, is do you have a product that people want, and then will they pay for it, and then do you actually care about it? Because it's going to be hard no matter what, and if you don't really care, then at some point you'll be like, I'd rather go find where their beer is cheap.
One question.
So that's day 1 and 2. So hopefully at this point you have a kind of cool product you've built. You have this great business case. You've surveyed customers. Maybe you even got somebody to pay for it. So day 3 is really your opportunity to wow the judges. So in Rover's case, we had a ringer. So this the guy who actually pitched it on Friday is a guy named Greg Gottesman, and he's a VC here in Seattle. So he's extremely experienced receiving these pitches and putting them together to some degree. So it was a little unfair, but he managed to put together a presentation that demonstrated exactly our business case. So in our case, these are slides from that presentation. Survey data was able to demonstrate that the average host expects $22 per night to host a dog, and the average dog owner would happily pay $28. So there's a market that functions and an opportunity for margin. So as Greg put it, the market can clear, owners are willing to pay enough to attract hosts and to allow a margin for the intermediary. So that's the kind of data. It's not quite as good as if we literally got somebody to pay for it, but the survey data is a pretty compelling case that's a legitimate claim. So then we won the startup weekend. We were all very excited. And for me personally, over the course of the weekend, Greg was kind of talking to me, saying, hey, you're not doing anything this summer. What do you think of coming and working at one of the companies that we've invested in? And actually, he was going to send my resume over to Scott at Cheeseburger. But then, after the weekend, he said, oh, this is actually a pretty exciting idea. And Monday, he called me and said, why don't you come down to the office and let's talk about it. And by Tuesday morning, I was working on it full time. So, quite a whirlwind. Showed up Friday, random event. Tuesday morning, it was a full-time job. And then, since then, it's been just an outrageous experience, honestly. We worked out of the incubation space in Madrona for about 3 months. As we started to kind of have a decent product and a little bit of traction, Greg managed to convince Aaron, who's our CEO, Aaron Easterly, to work on this full-time as CEO. What a lot of people don't know about him, he's kind of a very serious businessman, but he has a 6-pound Pomeranian named Caramel. So he has a very soft spot in his heart for dogs. So he perfect fit for our business. After February of 2012, we moved to Pioneer Square into real offices, which is when you start to really feel like a real business, going from incubation space, into an actual office that has your name on the door, or has your company's name on the door. And then recently we actually moved just, you can actually literally see our building 3 buildings down the street at Olive and 8th. So we've just moved there. And it's from 1 employee to about 24 plus 10 or 12 dogs on any given day. Just to give you some context, this was our actual startup weekend project, or product that we demoed. This was, it's unfortunately you can't quite see the text, but we were actually a place for Rover at that point. It's dog fur on our logo. And then our map of fake sitter data. And then here's actually our site today. So we've been through several iterations between here and there, but this is what it looks like today. So I just wanted to end on a couple things I think I've learned both from Startup Weekend and then also just the past 2 years. So, as I mentioned, it's really about the customer. Who's your customer? What is it they actually are willing to pay for? Those 2 pieces, at least in Rover's cases, what we figured out so far, get them in the door is really the last piece. Once you have something your customers are happy with and willing to pay for, you just have to figure out how to get them across the threshold, and then you can profit. For the engineers in the room, I can say, I think this is probably true of any skill set, but I just only really personally know from an engineering perspective. The thing that at least allowed me to participate in this awesome project is that for the previous several years, I'd been working on all sorts of projects. So for me personally, it was mastering Django and web development. So I had, in the course of college, I had Wombat, which I mentioned was the museum thing, Walking Textbook was a sell your textbooks on campus. CBLI was my friend's website for his legal organization. Getacular was supposed to be cheap GitHub hosting. The CME Hub was contract work that was continuing medical education website. Patients.io was supposed to be retirement home management. Strongman is supposed to be your favorite colloquial phrases, and Chinese, and Intern Seattle was a Seattle internship site. So although these were all fundamentally flawed projects in some way or another, they were very useful for mastering the skill sets that were relevant. And finally, I would just say, it's all about the people. If you think about the history of Rover, the history of any startup weekend team in general, it really comes down to who's involved. So Greg convinced me to participate in this thing. It was a fun summer project that then I've now deferred or gone on. I'm on leave of absence for now, the 3rd year, which my parents are thrilled about. And managed to convince Aaron to join us. Every single hire in a startup our size is a key hire, and we've had exceptionally key hires like Scott recently. That's really the history of Rover in a nutshell. Lastly, if you're an engineer, come talk to us afterwards. I'm tired. Play with dogs every day. Oh, actually, let me point out this last photo. I'll just say it seems very staged. This is actually just like a random afternoon. So all the dogs in the office, that's just a typical day. So I think there's, I see 7 dogs. So that was just like a random afternoon. We pulled everybody together. So typical day at the office is pretty wild. So Scott and I will take questions.
How did you get your first 1,000 users, both the sitters and the stayers?
Let's see, first 1,000 users. So I think the thing that drove it actually was on Startup Weekend. We had a Launch Rock page. Somebody else had set up the Launch Rock page here. You guys, yeah. So we had a Launch Rock page, and I think we managed to, through people's social networks, get about 600 signups onto the Launch Rock project. And then, so we blasted those out via email, and that probably got, I don't know if it was 1,000, but at least the first 500. After that, yeah, that's certainly the first big chunk.
You started in Seattle.
Seattle, yeah. So we very much focused on the Seattle market, got sitters, and then gradually, incrementally moved to other major markets, and now just kind of organically, largely, it's grown up in kind of the smaller markets in between larger markets. But in any marketplace business, it's all about, you have to figure out supply side first, and then now we've mostly figured out supply, figuring out demand next.
Can you talk a little more about that? About a lot of teams in this room are facing these classic challenges of a two-sided marketplace. And one way that some people are attacking it is to kind of spoof the one side while they build up the second side, or to how did you guys build up your two-sided marketplace? What recommendations would you have for any teams in that?
So a lot of different mechanisms to build up the two-sided marketplace. So there's all sorts of different communities where people are currently hanging out. So you can think about people looking for a job. So in our case, right, people are actually looking for income-generating opportunities. So you can post on job sites. There's hundreds and hundreds of sites where people are looking for dog sitting job type things. May not be quite as relevant in some cases. Certainly Facebook word of mouth, Craigslist. There's really a ton of different ways to go about it, but it's I think it really largely will vary depending on what your supply side of the marketplace actually is.
I think you're right though, in a two-sided business, it is a little smoke and mirrors until you sort of get it going, right? You're always trying to like tell sellers, which is in our case dog sitters, oh yeah, there's going to be people here who are going to want your services, right? And then you're always trying to tell buyers, which is in our case owners, oh yeah, we got people to take care of that. And you're just having to hustle and hope that, when the heat's on, when somebody actually says, yeah, we'll pay you, that, oh my god, I hope we can find somebody on the other end by hook and crook, right? Whether it's people Craigslist, whatever it is, it's kind of the only way to get it going. I can't think of any other way, but if you talk to every marketplace business, that's how they all got going one way or the other. It's just sort of like, I need both hands to do it.
Sort of like this, right? Sort of like.
Or you end up with a whole bunch of dogs at your house for the weekend.
That's right, that's right. And you know what? That's what you do when you're starting, because you want that person to have a good experience. And I'm reminded of a company that's in Austin, Texas. I think they're bigger now. They're called Food on the Table. A guy named Manuel Russo started it, and he's a real voice in the lean startup movement. And it's like Amazon Fresh, deliver food to your house. They're trying to do it better. But literally, him and his partner, like, you put in the order, and they would go shopping for the food, right? And then deliver it to your house, right? Because they hadn't built a whole automation system. They didn't have a volume. That was like their first 10 customers. It's just they were going shopping. But for the customer, that was kind of somewhat opaque. They just thought food showed up on their porch. And I think now, there's two sides of it, right? And people go shop for food for other people, and it all works out great.
Yeah, so how many people from your original Startup Weekend team continue full-time?
So currently full-time it's me. A guy named Farhad Kassad worked with us part-time. He's an engineer. He worked with us for probably the first year and a half on a part-time basis, but he had a grown-up job also, so he did that. So.
Was that because people weren't willing to quit their day jobs, or was that just due to the venture fund backing you guys only wanted you, or?
So if you look at a Startup Weekend team, our team was exceptionally large. It was about 13 people, and especially the early stages. Once you're past Startup Weekend where everybody's working for free, it's not really plausible to have actually 13 people start all at the same time. Just because at the very beginning it's still the seeds of a project. Hypothetically it could have worked to have had many more people. At the beginning it really only made sense to have a small number to start.
Guys, my team worked for me. No way I was going to let you go.
How did you deal with that from a team perspective? You have 13 people, maybe everyone wants to be involved. How do you kind of get real about what it is moving forward?
Someone like Greg is uniquely suited to handle that exact problem. So he handled that problem very well. Largely, the reality is most people had real jobs. I was just, here and goofing around. So most people were perfectly happy to let the project continue without them. And everybody from Startup Weekend, actually, in fact, Startup Weekend, the actual Startup Weekend organization, are all shareholders, hold common shares. So.
Other questions?
Alright. Sorry, man.
Keep them coming, no problem.
Passion versus good business idea. What should we prioritize if we have to?
I mean, Rover.
People, and then people, the quality of the team.
Yeah, Rover's an awesome project to be working on, but the reason it's plausible is because of that survey data, right? I mean, passion, I don't know, passion goes a long ways, but you have to have a plausible business idea. Ideas are a dime a dozen, right? But the right place, right time, right business idea is pretty powerful too. So I don't know, I would vote for business idea, frankly, plausible business idea. Different.
Well, I would vote the opposite actually.
Oh, uh-oh.
So I'd only vote the opposite, which is if you have some set of people that you're trying to solve problems for, in this case dog owners, and the first business, and you're very passionate about that, and the first model that you come up with, or the first solution you come up with didn't quite work, then you can pivot. Right? You can say, well, I didn't quite get it with that, but I still care about helping these folks, so maybe I'm gonna do it differently. Or in your case, you're working on that food with friends app, you eat with friends app, right? So like you care about that, and so maybe your first design of the app doesn't quite work right, so you pivot and change it. Versus if you go the other way around, I think starting any small business, whether it's a beauty salon or a restaurant or a .com mobile app, whatever kind of business, like it's hard, right? It's hard to just do stupid stuff like rent space and get a checking account and things like that. There's headwind. So I think that it has to be a customer that you care about and you care about solving their problem, and that you're happy just working on it. Because if it's the other way around, at least for me, I'm speaking for myself, if it's just, I'm doing it sort of as a mercenary, like when I start bumping into walls, I'm just like, I don't really care about this, I don't want to work on this anymore. And then it's over. Maybe it feels different. Maybe you're more cold-hearted than I am.
Likely.
Teams always get discouraged when they don't win. Any words of advice to teams that don't win? Because there can only be one first place.
I think it's, you mean at startup weekend specifically in this case?
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's just, it's the whims of the judging, right? You shouldn't be discouraged by any means. The judges are coming at it from a very specific perspective. And in a business in general, you win and lose sometimes. Sometimes your competitor does something that you wish you had done, or sometimes your competitor beats you to the punch on something. And it's, in a startup's always this. And if you have to be able to take the trough and figure out what it is that keeps your team together through that trough.
Another interesting point on that, you win a startup weekend, yeah, there's a great prize pack, like you get to take home an Xbox, that's great. We're not telling you that like you can't go get customers. It's you might be wildly successful and not win startup weekend. Who cares? It's a weekend, it's some judges, they didn't dedicate any, you put your heart and soul into this, they came out for a few minutes and told you their thoughts. Winning startup weekend doesn't guarantee success, and losing startup weekend or not, taking first place doesn't mean anything either. So take the prize pack, but not life or death.
I want an Xbox.
It's around here somewhere. More questions?
Can you go over the timeline of idea generation, during startup weekend to seed funding to getting into the accelerator?
Sure. So the idea generation was very ad hoc. I mean, I certainly don't think at the beginning the intent was this would become a business. That was just Craig had literally thought this was kind of a plausible idea, went out there and pitched it. The advantage of the guy who pitched it being a local VC is that the process is massively accelerated, right? So, once I was working on it full time on Tuesday, that was, he had managed to wrangle together some seed funding. So it's a very quick process. But then we operated off seed for about 6 or 9 months, and then once Greg managed to convince Aaron to join, we had a more kind of legitimate team. Aaron's a very well-respected, experienced guy, so that was sufficient for us to raise Series A in kind of beginning of 2012, and then we since have raised our Series B. Brad Feld, Any way in the back.
Did you at any point feel like Seattle was not the best place for starting a startup?
Can you repeat that?
So the question was, do you ever feel like Seattle is not the best place to start a startup because you love Seattle? But I'm personally from Seattle, so I don't have. Right, came here straight out of college, so I can't say with really high confidence that I would be the best person to answer that question. But Funding wise, so our Series B was raised from Founder Group, which is based in Boulder, Colorado. So after a certain threshold, you're able to go travel out and look. And certainly a good portion of our seeking was done in the Bay Area. So there's enough cross pollination, enough investment across state boundaries that maybe for the initial stuff, certainly friends of mine who have raised seed here have said it's harder for them when they have friends who've raised seed funding in the Bay Area. But on the other side, anecdotally, hiring engineers here is very hard. Hiring engineers in the Bay Area is apparently like you have to like grab them and then drag them back to your office. So there's some pieces that are better here, some pieces that are worse here.
One thing to keep in mind with that, it could be a lot harder. We're still in one of the top 4 or 5 markets in the US for recruiting, certainly engineering talent, dollars for startups. I mean, you think about, you've got New York, San Francisco, LA, the list quickly, Boston, maybe Austin, maybe Boulder. I mean, Seattle's right in that mix. So I think it's super doable here. I mean, imagine if you were in little old Columbus, Ohio.
Where are you from, Ben?
I love Columbus. Other questions?
Do you think you're cats?
We do. One more.
Market research consist of during startup?
During startup weekends?
Yeah, was it just social media or?
So it was, I think we went to, so it was a lot of emailing, then social media, like, I think it was like a Survey Monkey, how much would you pay to do this, how much would you pay to do that, how much would you pay to do this, how much would you expect for this, how much would you expect for this, how much would you expect for this. I think we had a pretty good number of respondents, I think it was around 100, so it was a pretty compelling set of data by the end, I think, yeah.
So for the startup weekends I've been part of, we used Mechanical Turk, and we got, for not very much money, you can get a couple hundred responses.
Can you explain real quick what Mechanical Turk is for anyone who doesn't?
For those of you who don't know, you can go look it up on Google. No, just kidding. Mechanical Turk is a service offered by Amazon where people can do very small tasks and get paid by the task. So a small task might be as simple as the engine shows you a picture and they say, describe this picture. So that's the participant side of that. The other side of it is anybody can go in and Mechanical Turk and create a task that they want people to do, such as answer this question: how much would you pay to have your dog walked? And you can put some criteria on it, like, well, I don't know if you can put criteria on it, you can just put it in the questions, like, do you have a dog? If so, how much would you pay to get it walked or watched? So it's and you can pay a nickel for that, or 20 cents for that answer. Very simple way to get an answer. There's another product, I've never personally used it, but I've heard of it. It's called answertap.com. And somehow they have some magic where they have I think they basically get, it might not work on the weekend actually, but you have to look at it yourself. I think you can just literally say, I want to talk to a 34-year-old person of this gender in this location, and they find one for you, and then it's like chat roulette, then you're just there having a video conference like right away. And I think they sort of leverage people people at work who are just there and have a little thing on their computer, but so maybe it won't, well, but maybe there's people who work on the weekends. I don't know, but that might be a solution too for getting quick answers.
Thanks. All right, with that, I think let's close and we'll get back to work and hit it hard. Thanks so much, guys, for coming out. While we've got everyone here, anyone have any questions about anything before we